Hey, I'm Ashley Haugen. I am the host of Dying to Know More, a podcast about death and dying. And here is why I make this podcast. When I was around 4 years old, I remember one night going to bed, my dad was tucking me in, and I, for whatever reason, just lost it. I was convinced that he was going to die, and that just for whatever reason, I glommed onto that and was just begging him, please don't die. I don't want you to ever die. And I remember him sitting there just kind of dumbfounded. And as a parent myself, now I would probably have been just as dumbfounded, but he just was like, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die. It's all going to be fine. Um, and that core memory has been with me ever since then. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember just all of it. Um, Almost 20 years ago, I had an aunt die unexpectedly. It was my dad's sister. And when we went out to where she lived to kind of take care of the funeral care and things like that, it was such an eye opening experience. We had a private viewing before she was cremated. And they didn't really go the extra mile necessarily to, make her look presentable, so to speak. She was on a table and she had a plaid blanket pulled up to her neck, and she had, when the way she died, she hit her head, and um, so she had an open wound, and so she was it was pretty raw and jarring. And afterward, we met with the funeral director to kind of take the next steps, pick out, she was going to be cremated, so pick out an urn and things like that. And there was just such a used car salesman vibe to the guy. You surely you want the top of the line urn, you loved her so much, and it's a little more expensive, but nothing but the best, like that kind of vibe. And it was so obvious. My cousin, who was my aunt's only child, was there and obviously just devastated and kind of on autopilot. My dad was really able to kind of advocate for her with her decision making and things like that. And I was just kind of watching, I was observing all of this, and it was so jarring and so kind of icky, and in a way that I just, it was just weird. Um, anyway, so there was that experience. And then, I've since I've been doing this podcast, though, I've finally connected the dots, and everything's kind of come full circle in an interesting way, and for something that I can't believe I've missed my entire life. So, like I said, I had that core memory of bedtime and crying, and being terrified my dad was going to die. And when I realized, I was talking to somebody about the podcast and why I make it and things like that. And as we were discussing it, I realized that right around that time in bed when my dad was tucking me in, another aunt, my mom's sister, died by suicide. I don't remember, how things unfolded and things like that, but to hear the stories that my older siblings tell, my mom got the phone call and it was just this primal scream, and then this kind of chaos, and then, obviously trying to figure out what to do and how to take care of things and all of that. And I suspect, based on the timeline, that happened, and all of that news was probably incredibly terrifying for a 3.5 year old Ashley. And I think it probably um, kind of changed how maybe I hadn't been aware of death or the finality of it, or how people can just suddenly not be there anymore. And I was terrified that that was going to happen with my dad. And so that sort of led to a long period of time of being terrified of death. And I guess, I've worked in media for 25 years. I love interviewing people. I love listening to podcasts. And I've always been kind of drawn to death because of this very early childhood experience. And so all of those come together into what is now the Dying to Know More podcast. And the goal is to learn about every facet of death and dying, because it's something we're all going to do. And if I can share that with listeners, and we can all kind of maybe gain some education and some knowledge, and maybe be a little less afraid of something that is inevitable, then I consider that a success. So that's the story behind the podcast. And I hope that if you aren't a listener yet, I hope you become one. And I'm having a lot of fun making it and meeting some amazing people along the way. So that's the story.